The giant Grizzly lay still, seemingly dead, after taking two .45-70 shots to the chest by gold miner Johnny Graham. Its foot, still clamped in the treacherous contraption laid out by the conniving, opportunistic hide collector, the beast somehow managed to break the chain and escape into the woods, only to get caught up again between several logs. Johnny, eyes gleaming, approached the carcass with his Skinner knife in hand. He might get as much as $30 for this monster of a hide. As he approached unwittingly, the bear lunged at him, and before he could manage a single stab with his knife, the Bruin had ripped into the unsuspecting pioneer. What's up, guys? Iceman here. So this story is called Old Two Toes, and it's an old legendary bear tale. I know that this story has been told throughout history in various forms, but it is indeed a true story. And it's freaking crazy what went down with this great legendary bear. And before I get into it, I'd like to first off thank you guys for all your support on this channel, as it has been growing quite quickly. So I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button, subscribe to the page, and hit the bell so you're notified next time I post a video. And if you want to support me further, you can become a channel member or a patron. Links in the description below. And blessings to those who support the Iceman. So let's get into the story. At the turn of the century, the western United States was filling up with transplants. Settlers from back east eked out livings on brand new 160-acre homesteads carved out of the rugged wilderness. They started with meager gardens and small herds of cattle and hoped to progress to self-sufficiency. The pioneers had to contend with harsh weather conditions, isolation, and, in many cases, pressure from large predators. Hunting was essential for the survival of most families, and no hunting story was told more than the legend of Old Two Toes, a dangerous behemoth of a grizzly bear that, depending on who you asked, had claimed the lives of many cattle and even some humans. Old Two Toes received his infamous moniker in 1912. A settler named Johnny Graham had heard the rumors of a giant grizzly bear living in the area and occasionally giving the cattle herds some trouble. He set a bear trap near a horse carcass and waited for the grizzly to take the bait. Some say Two Toes had meddled with the local farmers enough to earn a bounty on his head. Some say Graham was only interested in the selling price of a gigantic bear hide. Either way, Johnny Graham was looking for a payday, but got more than he bargained for. The bear left the ashamed prospector laying in a pool of his own blood. A passerby came upon Graham and heard his chilling tale. The man gave him his word that he'd get help. Graham shortly after bled to death on the scene. Later, the trap was found with 3 bear toes still in its jaws. They had been chewed off by the determined grizzly, leaving the bear with only 2 toes on its right paw. A group of local men, well armed, took up the charge to track down the man-killing monster. After locating the wounded Bruin, they began to close in, but the bear escaped by crossing a river and entering the great Yellowstone forest, where hunting was outlawed. Reluctantly, the men decided to abandon their harrowing mission. The risk of paying heavy fines and getting their weapons confiscated by the government was too great. Old Two Toes wasn't heard from again for another 4 years. 61-year-old Pat Walsh, part of the small group of men who were hauling supplies across Yellowstone, took a break to camp at the Soda Boot Creek after a long day's trek. Pat was awakened that night to the sounds of something massive ripping through their supplies, which included cured meats. Pat ran at the bear, attempting to scare it off by yelling obscenities at it, while banging pans and pots together. The bear, unmoved, lowered its massive head and charged the unarmed man. Pat managed to grab a nearby axe and swung it manically in the dark. The bear had no problem swatting the weapon out of his hands and took the man to the ground, mauling his body mercilessly. Pat's horrifying cries of pain and anguish roused his traveling companions from their tents. They scrambled for any meager weapons they could find. The bear, unfazed by their appearance, kept its focus on ripping Pat Walsh to pieces. The men began shooting Roman candles at the bear and managed to scare it off. But it was too late for Pat Walsh. His body lay in ruin, and his life escaped him within the hour. Another 6 years passed without incident for old Two Toes, but eventually he had another rundown with a trapper outside of Yellowstone. A notorious prospector and poacher by the name of Joseph Frenchy Durrett lost his life to the Grizzly on June 12 of 1922. Old Two Toes was caught in a trap he set not far from the Slough Creek region near Yellowstone. Upon the exhilarating sight of an enormous male grizzly in one of his traps, Durrett rushed home to grab his .45-70 rifle and informed his mail-order wife of the discovery. He rushed out the door and told her he wouldn't be long. He never returned home. 2 days later, his decimated body was found somewhere between their home and the trap site. It's estimated he crawled nearly 1.5 miles after battling the bear, but finally succumbed to his injuries. His wife was reportedly devastated. At the scene of the attack, his rifle was found with its stock bitten in half and a severely scarred barrel. Only a single empty cartridge was found on the site. It's uncertain what exactly happened, but seems likely that he got one shot off and the bear mauled him and ran away. The trap still clamped to his foot. The bear likely snapped the chain with his 1,600 pounds and charged Durrett, dragging the trap and chain along with him. The empty 60-pound bear trap was found a year later, with the bear nowhere to be seen. No one knows exactly what happened to old Two Toes. He may have died from the wounds sustained in his encounter with Durrett, or he may have lived on in Yellowstone until being tempted by the food in another hunting camp. There is an 8-foot 6-inch hide in Pennsylvania that is reported to belong to the grizzly. A family descended from Franklin Manges claims that Manges shot and killed the bear on a hunting expedition in Grand Mesa. Another variation in the tale states that a group of government workers was engaged to dispose of the troublesome bear. They placed dynamite in a mound of garbage and waited for the bear to approach it. Once it began foraging through the trash, they blew it to pieces. Still, others claim there was a man who went by the name of Dale, who was attacked by the bear and knocked into a ravine. Two Toes stormed after him, but slipped in the scramble down the hillside, exposing his underbelly. It was then that Dale put several bullets into the bear's underside and skull, finally ending his legendary saga. Jeez, what do you guys think about that tale? It's interesting how way back in the day, like the 1900s or something, to my understanding, the early pioneers were bent on eradicating all the grizzly bears. I think they were doing this because the bears would constantly be attacking their cattle and putting their families at risk. So they were greatly interfering with their way of living. And my speculation is that the natives didn't have that sort of dilemma with the bears because they didn't have domesticated cattle, to my understanding. So they must have chosen to live more in harmony with the creatures. but it's just one of those things that is tough to balance for many, as far as I see it. Do you choose to wipe out all these bears who are inhibiting your prosperity? Or do you choose to continue on with them at your doorstep? Because on one hand, it's kind of disturbing to think of a great, beautiful bear being stuck in some trap. In my opinion, that's quite inhumane and could very well cause a miserable death to any animal that gets caught in it. But for whatever reason, they must have thought those to be sufficient in those days. Every time I watch a video on YouTube and I see a wolf stuck in a trap or something like that, I really just pity the animal. And I can't imagine ever wanting to do that to an animal, especially a bear or a wolf. But I'm curious what you guys have to say about those things. And have you heard of Old Two Toes? Do you think that this bear deserved to die? Or was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time and became partly disabled from his interaction with man, and from there had to find a new way to survive? But nonetheless, really appreciate you guys for following my channel here. So subscribe to this page if you will, like the video, and stay tuned for more chilling tales from the Iceman.